Hey people, good evening, good evening. So on my walk and talk this evening, I'm going to talk to you about vaccines and why I'm so passionate about not over vaccinating my dogs and the reasons for that. So I've just got Alfie here. Alfie's in for a little bit of a boot camp. And I got Bear and Oliver. Oliver, hello. So we're just out for our evening stroll. So vaccinations. So I'm just going to talk you through what I do when I get a puppy. So when Bear was a puppy about 3 years ago, I had his core vaccines done at 14 weeks of age. So when puppies are born, they have natural immunity from their mother's milk. The antibodies in the colostrum will give them natural immunity up until about 14 weeks of age. And then what happens is that natural immunity wears off, and that's when you want to get their core vaccines done. So the core vaccines are for parvo, distemper and hepatitis. So when you get the core vaccines done, some dogs can have adverse reactions to that. And that will depend on a variety of things. It will depend on their size. It will depend on their immunity. And it will depend on the strength of their immune system. So it's really important that when you get your vaccines given to your puppy, that you're very vigilant and observant about any changes in their health, any changes in their temperament, and their physical state as well. So some puppies will have adverse reactions in the form of diarrhea or sickness. Some will get a lump at the site of the injection. So if that happens to your puppy, it's really important that you tell your vet. And you tell your vet when it occurred, and if it occurred a few days after the vaccine, or even a few weeks after the vaccine, you must report it to your vet, because your vet has an obligation to report any adverse side effects to DEFRA. So you can actually go on DEFRA website and go on adverse reactions to vaccines page for dogs. Oliver! And you can record any adverse reactions, because it's important to do that so that the data is then received by the British Veterinary Association and obviously the vaccine companies, so that adverse reactions can be logged and monitored to gauge whether or not that vaccine is safe. So that's what I do with puppies. Hey Alfsky, you all right, mister? And then 3 months after I've given the puppy their core vaccine, I will get a titer test done, which is just a blood test which you can ask for at the vets. Most vets do it, some vets don't. But the reason you'd get a titer test is to monitor whether or not they've got antibodies now to parvo, distemper and hepatitis. And if they have antibodies which have been given to them from the vaccines, then they're not going to get those diseases. But the key thing to note is some dogs are what we call non-responders. So they don't respond to vaccines. It doesn't matter how many vaccines you give them, they still aren't going to show as having antibodies. So that's really important to note. Hey, mister. Good boy. So then at year 1, I will get another titer test done, a blood test, because I want to check if my dog has got antibodies to parvo, distemper, hepatitis. And if they have got antibodies, then I don't want to revaccinate them with more antibodies. And this is the reason why. If your dog has got antibodies and you give them more antibodies, it puts a massive hit on the immune system. And some dogs get adverse reactions because they've already got antibodies, and then the immune system gets compromised, and then that's where they can get side effects. And those side effects can vary from diarrhea, sickness, lethargy, physical kind of muscle weakness, so A dog might go lame, or they might show weakness when they walk. You can have vaccine site reactions. You can have, in some dogs, extreme cases of meningitis, of collapse, of anaphylactic shock, and in some cases death. So it's really important that you monitor your dog's response to that vaccine. So at year 1, I'll get a blood test done. If they've got antibodies, I'm not going to revaccinate them because they are immune, they're protected. And then in 3 years' time, so when they're 4 years old, I'm then going to retest them with a titer test, a blood test, and I'm going to check their antibody level again. And if they've still got antibodies, I don't need to vaccinate. If they haven't got antibodies, but they did before, I can then choose to vaccinate them just for that disease that they haven't got any antibodies for. And that way you are protecting your dog's immune system, you are protecting their health, which is really important, and you're ensuring that they are healthy and happy. So why do vets insist that you have a vaccination on your dog every year? It's pretty simple, okay? Pharmaceutical companies provide the drugs to vets to sell. So why, when the British Veterinary Association in their guidelines state that vaccines cover a dog for anywhere between 3 and 7 years, and in some cases lifetime, why are vets not responding to that guideline? Why are vets encouraging dog owners to get vaccines done every year? In my view, it's simply down to money. So if the British Veterinary Association are advising us that vaccines will cover your dogs for 3 to 7 years, if not lifetime, then you don't need to get an annual vaccination. And the other issue I have at the moment is the vaccine for leptospirosis. So leptospirosis is Weil's disease. So it's carried by rat urine. It's prevalent in stagnant water, stagnant lakes, where there is a high infestation of rats. And they can get leptospirosis from exposure in those environments. But when I looked at the data of leptospirosis in this country, 50 cases have been reported in the UK in 1 year, 50 cases. So why do vets insist that leptospirosis vaccine is also one of the core vaccines? I don't know. So the worrying thing is there's 2 vaccines you can get for your dog for lepto. There's one called Lepto 2, which gives 2 strains of the leptospirosis. And then there's Lepto 4, which gives 4 strains, which obviously is a lot stronger. And lepto vaccine has been recorded in numerous ways on Facebook, where dog owners have recorded a serious adverse reaction after their dog has had their lepto vaccine. And it's also been recorded in data on the internet as well. So lepto can cause severe adverse reactions, anaphylactic shock, lethargy, death in some cases. And it's in some dogs, it's not in all dogs. So this isn't meant to scare you, it's meant to make you aware and to enable you to be more informed and make a choice about what medications, what toxins you give your dog. So I'm not a big lover of lepto, and the reason is because I work with a lot of dogs and have worked with a lot of dogs in the past that their physical, emotional and behavioural state has changed dramatically following vaccinations, particularly the lepto vaccine. And we're talking within days or weeks, clients have said that their dog has just changed. And that's really worrying if that's happening from a vaccine that's being recommended by vets to protect your dog against a disease where there's only 50 cases in the UK reported last year. So lepto vaccine, I definitely don't advise getting your dog immunised against, unless you are living in rat-infested environments and there's lots of stagnant water around and your dog is prevalent in swimming in that water and drinking that water. So, good boy. Hey, mister. Yeah. So lepto vaccine is a definite no-no, and I have however many dogs. I have 12 dogs at the moment, but I've had many dogs over the years, and I live on a 100-acre farm. We have 3 lakes on the farm. There's rats everywhere. I have never in 10, 12 years got my dogs vaccinated against lepto vaccine, ever. And none of my dogs have ever got leptospirosis. And the key thing to remember is leptospirosis is a disease that you can treat with antibiotics. If you catch it early, you see the symptoms of lethargy, of sickness, they generally stop eating. It can be treated with antibiotics. It's not like a disease like parvo that is really, really serious and can kill dogs. So it is treatable. And I'm really, really passionate about informing clients and giving them the information so that they can go armed to the vets. So when the vet says to them, your dog is due its booster vaccine, and they just automatically give the dog those core vaccines and the lepto vaccine, I like to make sure people are informed and knowledgeable about the risks of these vaccines. So it's not about being irresponsible with your dog. It's not about not protecting your dog. It's actually completely the opposite. It's very much about protecting your dog, very much about being a responsible owner, because I want to protect my dog's health and well-being. I don't want to compromise my dog's immune system by filling them full of toxins and medications that actually can cause a lot of medical conditions in them. So that's why I like to share this knowledge and let you guys know about this. So the key thing is, if your dog's had any adverse reactions to vaccines, you need to report it to the vet, and the vet has an obligation to report it to DEFRA. That's really important. And if they won't do it, then you need to do it, okay? If your dog has had adverse reactions, there are some homeopathic treatments you can give your dog. So it's important to contact a holistic vet or a homeopathic vet, because you can get some remedies that help soak up those toxins, counteract those effects that it's had on your dog. So vaccinations, really, really important. Keep your dog protected, but also be aware of the choices that are out there. And it's the same with flea, tick and worm treatment. So fleas and ticks are only around from April to October. Worms, you know, if you've got a dog that's constantly eating poo off the floor, then you might want to worm them a bit more frequently. But there are some drugs out there, Bravecto, NexGard, that have been issued with warnings, again, for adverse reactions. So I generally use a spot-on product called Indectrid for fleas, ticks, mites, lungworm, heartworm, and then I'll use Milbyworm or Milbymax pill for worming. But I will only give my dogs treatment between April and October for fleas and ticks. And I generally do it when and if I see fleas and ticks on my dogs. And again, we live on a farm. You know, there's deer around, there's foxes around, there's lots and lots of opportunity for dogs to get ticks on them. And then worming, I generally do it in adult dogs, I generally do it twice a year. But again, I will sometimes send a poo sample off to wormcount.com where they can test the dog's poo. Sounds lovely, doesn't it? But they test the dog's poo. I'm just gonna have to change arms, Alf. Sorry, my arm's getting a bit weak. They test the dog's poo, and if it's got worms in it, then you know that you need to worm your dog. But I won't do it more than 2-3 times a year. So the idea is we're not filling our dogs full of toxins, full of medications, compromising their immune system. And I work with so many dogs with behaviour issues that have just been over-medicated and their immune system is really compromised. They suffer with bouts of diarrhoea, sickness. Their coat might be really dry. They might suffer with yeast infections, hot spots. And all of this is because their immune system is not healthy. So if you want to protect your dog's health, don't fill them full of medications and toxins. Be responsible, but be informed so that you can go to your vet and you can ask for these things that I've recommended instead of just going with what they advise. And I've got a great vet who knows I know what I'm on about, and we work together when we're trying to solve issues. And there's some great holistic vets out there. There's some great vets that really think outside the box and they're very proactive at preventing medical issues rather than being a reactive vet, and what I term as just sticking a sticky plaster, just giving you some medication to stop the symptoms rather than actually looking at the core of what is causing that medical condition. And if you don't ever find out what's causing that medical condition, then the symptoms are just going to keep coming. It doesn't matter what cream, what antibiotics, what steroids you put on it. It makes no difference. So I think some people worry if they don't get their dog vaccinated. They worry about, will they be able to take their dog to boarding kennels? We actually board dogs here with a titer test certificate. So if they've got proof that they've tested their immunity and they've got antibodies, then we'll accept that instead of a vaccine. Some kennels won't, some kennels will. The other thing people worry about is, can I insure my dog if they're not vaccinated? And I'd like to think insurance companies are being a little bit more forward thinking and accepting. Unfortunately, they're not. So you can insure your dog, but you won't be able to get cover for parvo, distemper and hepatitis if you don't vaccinate. And that's just the way it is at the moment, unfortunately. They're not as far ahead as we are in their thinking and protecting dogs. Oh, Alfsky. Good boy. Sit. Good boy. And the last thing I wanted to talk about, because these are the key things that I talk to clients about when I meet with them. The key thing also is, don't be persuaded to get your dog spayed or castrated too early. And here's the reason why. If you've got a fearful or insecure dog and you spay them or castrate them whilst they're in that state, you can actually make them worse. You can actually make them more fearful and insecure because you're taking away all those hormones they need for confidence. So it really is detrimental to their emotional state. So generally, I won't castrate or spay a dog until it's fully grown. And in small dogs, that might be 1.5 years. In bigger dogs, that can be 3 to 4 years old. But I will make sure that my dog's emotional state is confident and balanced first before I spay or castrate them. And with females, you definitely want to let them have a season, if not 2 seasons. Some females will suffer with phantom pregnancies, so you're generally kind of persuaded to get them done a little bit earlier. And in some cases, it helps, but again, if your dog is fearful or insecure, then it doesn't help, it actually makes them worse. So don't be bullied into thinking you have to get your dog spayed and castrated under 1 year of age. Because again, a lot of dogs that I've worked with, their behaviour issues, Alfie, come. Their behaviour issues have started very soon after, good boy, they've been spayed or castrated. So be really mindful about your dog's emotional state before you get them spayed or castrated. That's really, really important. So that's it. That's my walk and talk. So the idea is to give you information, give you knowledge, so that you can go to your vets armed up and knowledgeable, and you can just have the discussion with them and feel that you know what you're talking about, rather than just going with what they do, what they say. It's really, really important, because if we can protect dogs' health and well-being and their immune systems, I guarantee you a lot more dogs would have less behaviour issues. A lot more dogs would. So help us, help them, and keep our dogs healthy and balanced. Alrighty, guys. You alright, Alfsky? Oliver, say bye-bye. Good boy. Where are you, bear? Hey, fella. Alrighty, we'll chat to you soon. Have a good evening.